Hey, welcome to the Elle Russ Show. My name is Elle Russ, and I am a #1 best-selling author and master coach. My intention is to inspire, educate, and motivate you with weekly content featuring amazing guests and solo episodes. Visit my website, elleruss.com, to learn more about me, my courses, free masterclasses, partner discounts, and much more. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, we have Kelli Miller today, and she is the author of an amazing couples relationship book called Love Hacks, Simple Solutions to Your Most Common Relationship Issues. And she's also the award-winning and best-selling author of Thriving with ADHD. Welcome to the show, Kelli.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into your book, Love Hacks, let's talk a little bit about Thriving with ADHD. What prompted you to get to the point where you're going to write a book on that?
Yes. Well, I have two boys. They are now 14 and 11, and they both have ADHD. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it, misunderstandings. And I just noticed I also worked with kids with ADHD, and there's this idea that there's something wrong with them if they have it. There's a deficit, so to speak. And so I wanted to create a book for kids to help them with self-esteem, to recognize their superpowers, and to really empower them. And that's how it started.
That's excellent. Tell us about, you're a psychotherapist. Tell us about your life. What got you interested in, this genre of what you do with your life?
Sure.
Yeah.
I've always loved it. I feel like I was always that one in 5th grade where people would be like, can I ask your advice about, I'd be like, yes, sure. I loved it. I love connections. I love relationships. I love people. So I think it was just a natural fit to help people through difficulties. And I think kind of over the years, having my own difficulties have made me an even richer therapist. So I think that, I think there is something to be said about kind of as you age, you get wiser, you've been through more. And so hopefully I'll continue to kind of have some growth in that so I can continue to help others.
Before we get into Love Hacks, let's talk. I mean, you've been considered by, the examiner.com, other places as the women's relationship expert. So let's talk about some of your failed relationship scenarios. Do you mind sharing a few of the things that maybe you've gone through, some moments where you're like, okay,
yes,
shift?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think that when you're young, you get sort of bright-eyed and kind of, super optimistic about things. And then as you get older, you kind of realize, oh, okay, yeah, the mistakes I made. So, if I think back to college and maybe those, I mean, I think that, I was probably chasing a lot. And so there wasn't like a lot of reciprocal love, right? It was sort of like that high of the chase. And
right.
So, right, it was like, oh my God, if I can get this guy, that means I'm worthy. And I think that's kind of how I put it in my mind. And so I think obviously, with experience and time, it's like, oh, wait, hold on. That's not real love. That's lust and that's obsession. And it feels really good, but it's not stable and it's not going to last. So I kind of help coach some of my clients through that now that I see, especially in their early 20s and kind of wanting to obtain that thing. So we work through that. But yeah, that's kind of what I think of when I think of kind of, the failed relationships aspect of it.
Are you currently in a relationship?
I am currently seeing somebody. We're in the beginning stages and we'll kind of see, but it feels good so far. So that's really nice.
Must be interesting because I'm sure like if I were a guy and I was dating you, I'd be like, I'm going to read her book like 5 times. I'm going to, but again, you can't like trick that, but I'm assuming like it's very interesting, particularly when it comes to relationships. And I'm imagining some people might be like kind of on the eggshells a little bit around you, like, oh, am I behaving properly?
100%. And I'm always like, no, please don't, right? Like I'm a human first, and I have my blind spots too, I mean, we all do, right? So it's like, yes, this is my job, but I'm also a human and, I'm going to tantrum like everybody else, right? And like, I'm not going to see things perfectly. And so, yeah, I don't want to be put into that standard of like, she knows more or better because I really don't.
And you mentioned you had 2 children. That doesn't necessitate that you would have a partner necessarily, but were you married at any point?
Yes, I was married for almost 15 years.
Okay, so when you look back, obviously without, trashing your ex, of course,
What were the things in hindsight that you realized? Was it that you were too young? Did you just need to learn the things you learned? Like, if you could sum up, like, oh, these, because
Yeah,
I can look back at a relationship and go, this is what I needed to learn that I hadn't learned. And, that's why
sure,
that didn't work. Yeah.
sure. I mean, I think the beautiful thing about my ex-husband and I is we both said that we don't regret the marriage and the relationship. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think so. One thing I learned was, relationships don't have to last forever for them to be meaningful and serve their purpose, right? So that's one thing that has really stuck with me. It's like, okay, cool. Like you can have something special with somebody. It doesn't mean you're meant to be forever. I mean, sometimes people really do grow apart or they evolve in different ways. And so for me, I think it was just, I think we really did have a great relationship. And I think at some point we realized we were going in different directions, and that's okay, right? And I think when it comes to relationships, both people really have to want it for it to work, right? And so if one person kind of is like, okay, yeah, I'm sort of more done, so to speak, then yeah, unfortunately, you can't force something that for them to feel that they don't. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important to, my whole idea of writing love hacks is to really to try to work through that, right? And I would rather couples say, look, we have tried everything and now we're at this point, rather than like, them to look back and say, God, we didn't try hard enough, or I wish I went to therapy, or, that type of thing. I think that regret is harder to stomach.
It's interesting. I'm thinking of a story this is like 20 something years ago. Friend dating a guy. She was like 8 months pregnant at the time. They were been together for a while. And he suddenly out of nowhere became a cocaine addict. Like out of just like literally just happened. And it was a whole thing. And I remember her calling me and she was like at her wit's end on this one. She was like, I've, 8 months pregnant. This is just a disaster.
Mhm.
And I remember at the time saying to her, I was like, hey, look, you did take a vow in sickness and in health, and he is an addict. I think you need to do, it would be my suggestion to do one last ditch effort for like a rehab
Yeah.
situation, like, something, just one more step. Well, guess what? 20 years later, they've got 3 kids happily. He's been sober. They're fine. They're great. Sometimes maybe it's
Mhm.
just that last push, and then sometimes not. But that
Right.
was one
Sure.
where, hey, that worked out. Not to say that it wouldn't, even if she gave up on him, maybe. But it was one of those things where it was like, and I was not married at the time, but just in recognizing, we hear the vows in every movie for eternity. And I remember being like, well, and she was like, okay. And, they are just a great couple, so happy, wonderful sex life, laugh all the time. And you know what? Tough times back then, but one last ditch effort. So sometimes it's just that, huh?
You're 100% right. Yes. And I think again, it's that trying that is so it speaks volumes to your partner, you're in it, you're trying. I mean, and then after, right? After you tried and it's not working, that's a different story. But I do agree. Yeah, give it all you can for sure.
And then that's what I said to her. I said, at least then you can be like, hey,
Right.
I tried everything. Like, I
Exactly.
went to
Exactly.
the end result. All right, let's talk about love hacks, these simple solutions to common relationship issues. Look, there's many common relationship issues. You go through a variety of them. I'd like to just touch
Sure.
on a couple. Let's talk about expectations of who does what and what does what. Chores. I do this, he does that, these arguments over that. And one of the things I've done, at least, that seems to work, whether it was with a roommate in the past or currently
Mhm.
with my guy, is before moving in, sort of having that conversation like, hey, let's just talk about what is expected. Like, are you going to do the garbage? I do this, you do that.
Mhm.
Like, who's going to clean? And it just, when I did it in the past with roommates, it worked out so great because it's like they did their thing once a week and we never had an argument over the dumb
Yep.
stuff. And so couples are out there, usually it's the women that are feeling like they're doing way more, right?
Yeah.
And their guys are slobs and and they have to nag them and all this kind of stuff. So either give us a few examples of some 180s that happened in this
Yeah.
situation, or let's just talk
Sure.
about this.
Absolutely. And to speak on what you just said, I am all about those proactive conversations. And I think so many couples are afraid to have that because it's like, well, things are okay now, and I'm scared to rock the boat, or, no, it's fine. We don't need to do that. Things have been okay, and it's like,
Mm,
no, like that proactive conversation is key. So I love that you had that and you've had evidence that it does work. So I recommend the same thing with my couples. I say, have that conversation before you move in. And really, because the truth is we grow up with what we feel is normal, right? And it's very different from our mind, from our partner's mind. Some people grow up with parents who did everything. Other people grew up where the kids had to do chores, so it just looks so different. And so we do need to have those conversations. But for the couples who've come in and they're already arguing and things like that, it sounds so funny and I sound like a teacher, but I'm a big proponent of like a chore chart of literally going through and talking about, okay, I'm going to do laundry. Okay, you're going to clean the toilets. Okay, who's going to walk the dog, and really writing it down. And it's a hard conversation to have at first, but then it's very simple because then it's clear. Everybody knows what expectations are, and you have it written down and it's right there. And so that I feel like is very helpful, to just have something in writing right there on the refrigerator, and everybody knows, and you can switch off, right? So it's like, great, week 1 is this and week 2 is this, and we alternate. So nobody feels like they're doing the harder chore, so to speak.
Let's just say that you're already in this mess, okay? And you haven't had the conversation, but now you need to. Now, I know you would suggest, go like, hey man, I'm doing all this shit over here. Can you get it together? We're not going to present it like that. But how could someone think about presenting the idea of a chore chart, or like, hey, honey, let's map out some stuff. I'm feeling like things are unequal. What's the best way to approach it in a positive, proactive way versus you're a horrible.
Yeah, exactly. And you keep leaving your socks on the floor. Yeah. Right. I'm a big proponent of the sandwich method. So we start out with the good, we get to the meat or kind of the difficulty, and then we end with the good. So I would start off and say, I'm so happy in this relationship. I love X, Y, and Z about you, and I really think we work well together. Something I've been thinking about that I think we can even work stronger together is if we had real clear boundaries around chores. I think it would be very advantageous if we knew who did what. So I was thinking of, creating a chore chart together, and then end it again on the good, and I'm just so happy with you. And I know this is going to make us, even better partners.
I love that. I hope everyone listening hears that. What I love about it is the tone is such a throwaway. It's like, hey, there's nothing behind this. I don't care. Right. You could be talking about anything. I bought a loaf of bread, or I have cancer. Exactly. It's just like, it's a tone. It's just,
yes.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to be this big deal, right? Of like, and I think, tone is a lot. It's very true. So if you kind of approach it a little more positive and rather than like the ho-hum, it does make a difference.
I think the same goes for, I know I mentioned it before on a podcast or two. I've had this conversation, I've had this proactive one too, about expectations, about gifts, birthdays, holidays. How many times are women disappointed because the guy didn't read their freaking mind? Yes. It's so mean. It's mean. And a lot of them are clueless. It's just not their thing, Yes. Some of them are really great at it. But I had this conversation sort of at the beginning of a couple of relationships in the past, because I was tired of feeling like, also, I'm the type of woman who would cringe if someone took me out to dinner on Valentine's Day, right? Where other women would love that. And they, so like, guys don't know what to do. They don't know. Do you want to go out? That's my nightmare though. So that's why I had that conversation, and it was just perfect. And then, what? It's funny. I had this conversation once with someone, and it was very shocking. They were like, actually, I want my birthday every year, like big shindig. I want to bet. I was like, oh my God, see, that's not me. I would never request that. So I would never know to just expect or do that for someone. And, it's so much easier. And I have found that it's great. Like, my guy knows what to do. He knows what I want. Like, it's just clear. And then everyone's happy and they get what they want. And no one has to try to read your mind. So obviously no one's going to present it in a, hey, last Valentine's Day, you blew it. Our anniversary, you forgot again, jerk. Can you give me maybe another, I'm sure it's similar language, but maybe a way to bring this up if someone's in a relationship and they're like, because here's the thing, how it is. Christmas is coming and it's like your heart's sinking. You're like, they're going to fuck it up. I'm going to be disappointed, but you don't have to be, right?
Well, I think to your point, I also think some people try to test their partners. Like, if they really love me, they're going to get me X, Y, and Z, and it's like, no tests, no games. Just, like you said, I'm exactly the same way. I just feel like we should speak to our partners and tell them it would really mean a lot to me if you got me a handwritten card, if you did X, Y, and Z, right? And then our partners know, and they can show up for us. We don't have to test them.
Yeah. Or letting them know, like, I really, really care about my anniversary and I want something special. This is the kind of thing I would want. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I know some people in that scenario want the person to like come up with something. I'm a little bit more of the like, if someone's willing to be like, just tell me what you want, I'd rather just tell them.
Right.
I'd rather just have it all be clear. It's okay that it's not a surprise. You know, I don't need, for me, it doesn't need to be the mystery there.
Right.
I think I'm more concerned about them and their anxiety on, am I going to do the, you know, I'd rather just give them a win. So yeah, I love proactive conversations. And so if you haven't had them and you're in the middle of them, that doesn't mean go back and listen to the way she handled, Kelli just handled that whole scenario with chores. Let's talk about the two things that F up a lot of relationships: finances, the way people spend money, and also sex, right? Two big ones. So let's just talk about finances. You know, I mentioned to you before we recorded here that Ariel Ford, who's a fave of mine, and I've had her on the show, you know, talks about the story between her and her husband about, you know, she was used to like getting bargain stuff and cheap things and would never pay full price. And her husband was raised that, you know, you get nice things and the quality and it lasts longer. And she saw some validity to that. And he saw some validity to hers, but they had to have a conversation and make a deal. And I think the deal was that if either of them was going to spend over $500, they had to consult the other. But again, it was just a deal about that. So can you tell us some specific examples, sort of like that, of people you've worked with that where there's a conundrum there?
Oh, for sure. Yes. I'm so glad you brought this up. So, I mean, very similar to sort of the chores is these are conversations that need to be had like sooner rather than later, for sure. So I encourage couples to sit down and let's talk about financial goals, right? And so, because for some people, a year could look like, you know, saving for a while. For the other person, a year is like, no, that's where we're going to do our vacation and spend our fun money. So it's like, let's align on goals first and foremost and what that looks like and compromise. And what does 3 years look like? Do we want to start saving for a house? Do we have, you know, things like that? So I think the goals need to be aligned. I created a acronym called CLOSER. And I really like that because it's just sort of, I love acronyms because it can remind couples of like, oh, wait, hold on. Okay, what does that stand for? So C is for communicate, just like I said. L is for list goals. O is for organizing your priorities. S is for setting specific goals, like long-term or short-term. E is for envision. So what do you see for the future? And then R is like reviewing your goals because, you know, in 6 months, things could change. So let's sit down and review it. So I think that it is super important that we really talk about the hard stuff and then also talk about like the emotional piece that money brings up. So I created in my Love Hacks book something called an emotional inventory. So like and I have a list of questions like, what did money mean to you as a kid? What did you see your caregivers with money? Was it, you know, something to be scared of? Was it something that they fought over? Because there's so much emotion tied with money that as kids we sort of grow up with. And so I think if we examine that, that would make a lot of sense to us and our partners. Like, oh, okay, they had seen this growing up and that's why they're scared to lose money and they're saving so much or vice versa. So those are my thoughts around that.
Can you give us an example of a couple that had some kind of financial something issue that then got resolved and how they resolved it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the main thing that I see constantly is one partner is a saver and one is a spender. And sort of what do you do in that situation? Because it's really tough. And, you know, the answer is simple. You meet in the middle, right? Where the spender is going to want to spend, the saver is going to want to save. So how can we figure out ways? So yeah, I had one couple who the man was a really big spender, loved tech and gadgets and things like that. And the woman was more of a saver. And so it was like, okay, let's start again, aligning your goals. What does that look like? What does the saver want? And then I think it was kind of getting the spender on board with the saver of seeing the importance of saving. Why? You know, and they've got kids. It's like, okay, yeah, we got to start saving for college for these kids. And it's like, once I think that he saw the benefit of it, it was like, okay, there were eyes that were open. And then I think he helped her with sort of having more fun now of, okay, yeah, but we can spend on sort of these fun things and things like that. And so it's really sort of working together on how they both can feel satisfied financially, right? Because, you know, spenders are kind of more in the present and want to have fun. And then savers are more kind of worried about the future. So where can we meet in the middle where they both can feel safe?
Love it. Let's talk about sex, resentments, arguments, things not working out in the bedroom. Such a key part of a relationship, of every romantic relationship, unless it's, some other like
Sure.
asexual situation. Um, I don't know. I mean, I feel like initial compatibility is so important, but obviously people get detached from each other in relationships. They can get out of touch with each other and things can go sour.
Hmm.
But it's one of those things I've noticed, like anything in relationships, sometimes too much talking about it is, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Right. Can you kind of expand on what I'm saying about that, right?
Sure,
You're
sure.
always talking about sex and it's not, and then you're not in it. And it's like, oh, how do we get out of that
Yeah.
if someone's in
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's merit to both, right? To talking about it where it needs to be uncovered. And then I think you're right. Sometimes we can overdo it and then it creates a ton of pressure. And so in cases like that, where you feel like maybe your partner's shutting down and you can't talk about it, I love to introduce what's called sensate focus therapy. And really what it is focusing on the sensations of touch and texture and feel rather than actual sex and orgasm. And so it's like a 5-step process of really trying slowly to kind of connect with your partner again, where there's not a lot of talking about it, but it's really just sort of exploratory and fun and kind of light and focusing not on the verbal aspect of it, but just that physical connection. And so that might be one way where if it's just too heavy to talk about it conversationally, you can kind of dive into that and see how that works for you too.
So one of the things that seems to come up a lot, I hear it, you hear it out there in the ether, and it bothers me. Here, I guess I'm going to start off by saying there's such a right. I don't have sex with my friends. They're my friends, right? The only difference between my friends and my romantic relationship, right, is that we're doing something else.
Mhm.
And I do kind of feel like, hey, we're each other's person for this. I also, as someone who's very sexual and has a high sex drive, have had these conversations with people where I've said, hey, look, like I have a really high sex drive, this is a
Mhm.
situation. And also I care about it so much that if somehow I ever started to lose my sex drive, I would do everything I could to get it back. That's how much I care about it, right? Now, some people don't feel that way, but a lot of men do, but some don't.
Sure.
So there's that. Then there's this thing of like, I hate it when I hear this. Like some women's like, well, I'm married now. I don't get blowjobs. You're like, what? So you tricked your guy? Like,
Exactly.
I'm
Right.
sorry, but I gotta just say that like really bothers me. I hear this so much. Like, oh, well, she won't do that anymore. She says that she's not into it anymore. It's like that's kind of like trickery. I hate to say marital duty, old school, right? But it's a little bit like, come on, man, that's what they're there for. And so if someone
Mhm.
pulls out of that. I know that that happens a lot. Can we talk about that? It's just
Yeah.
it's disheartening. And also I feel like ladies, if you're out there, be honest about what you want and what you don't want. Don't do anything to get a guy because then you pull it away, not cool.
Yeah.
Same with the guy too. It would be the same thing.
Sure. The bait and switch is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, I think the first thing I want to address is it's natural, especially if you've been in a long-term relationship, that you're not going to have that same excitement and lust, right? It just can't
Sure.
last. It can't fade. So that's understandable. But I 100% agree with you. I think there needs to be effort put in to have a sexual relationship and to keep it going and do what needs to be done to keep it exciting. And whether that's the emotional connection, whether that is other physical things, but yes, I think that you're right. That is the one thing that differentiates a friendship versus a romantic relationship. And so, one of the things I talk about in Love Hacks is that people can build up resentments. And then, there's nothing that's like less sexy than like, resenting your partner
Yeah.
and feeling angry. And so if we can uncover some of those resentments, I think that feeling connected emotionally can create more of a physical connection. So I talk a lot about, exploring those resentments. What are you resentful for? Do you need remorse from your partner? Do you need another apology? Can we go there and sort of talk about it so that we can uncover it? Because I think people bury this so deeply and then it does affect their sex life. And then so if we can get through that, then we can start building that physical connection again.
Yeah. I had a conversation with my partner where at the beginning of everything, you were talking about sex and made sure we got tested, being the responsible adults and all of that. And I said, hey, look, like, here are some expectations I have with sex in life, and kind of told them what I already said to you. And then the other thing I said was, look, there's going to be time. I go short of someone being like, someone just died or someone's really sick and not feeling well. I'm like, if I don't feel like it, I'm still going to please you, right? Like, and I expect that in return as well, and I don't mean to be crass here, but it's like, you don't got 2 fingers in 5 minutes. I mean, no, really though, sorry about that, audience, but no, but like fucking for real, guys, right? Like, so I feel like that was a thing. And that's great. It kind of set that thing. Like, it's like, hey, we expect to be this for each other, even if you're not into it, that's okay. But if you're not sick or dying or busy or whatever, can you help me? Because I want it. And that's important. And I think that there's some resentments that happen on both sides when that's not honored, if that makes sense.
I wish every person were like you. I probably wouldn't have a job, but like, it's true. I mean, I think you have a really great attitude about it, and it's so true. It's like, hey, I'm in this with you. I know there are some days when I'm just not going to be into it, and some days you might not be into it. Let's make an agreement that like we'll help each other, right? Just like you would emotionally, right? But we're going to do it sexually. But I think you're right. I think people don't view it in that same way. It's like, well, what am I not? I'm not getting anything out of this, so nah, I'm too tired, And it's like, no, we have to recognize like it all evens out anyway, right? So it's like, I think there's this idea of like, but I'm going to give too much and then I'm not going to get, it's maybe like a scarcity mindset or something like that. So I love your attitude. I think that's beautiful, and we should all
have these
all take it home.
Yeah, take some notes, everyone. But I mean, honestly, but that is, aside from the fact that we're compatible, we have a wonderful, we're on the same wavelength there. And I know not all couples are, or, a woman has a baby or goes through menopause and things change, right? And so one of the things, me working with thyroid clients, and when thyroid is off, then sex hormones can be off. And so women, before they fix their thyroid problem, can have issues, right? They don't want it. And that is what is expressed. They're just like, I feel bad because like, I want to want it. Do you know what I mean? And so I know, look, short of health issues and some struggles, but like you said, there's some things you might be able to do to help out, even if you're not available for it yourself. Let's talk. I thought it was interesting you brought this up in your book. Let's talk about traditions and rituals. One of the things my stepfather says is it's never too late to start a tradition. Can we talk about this element you brought into your book about creating this and each other?
I'm so glad you did. So one of my favorite things, I think, is what I call quick partner connections. And one of them that you had said in there was traditions. And so another acronym is TEAS. And my first one is traditions. And so it's, hey, how can we, the two of us, have something special just between us, right? That nobody else has. We don't have it with anybody else. Is it, 3 goodbye kisses in the morning? Is it telling each other what we're grateful for? Is it, whatever it is between you two that you just have? E is for efforts, right? So what can we do for each other? We're not going to tell each other because that would defeat the purpose, but what can I do to kind of go the extra mile, right? If we're in a state that has ice and snow, and can I just, defrost my partner's windshield this morning? Can I, clean the bathroom and not say anything, things like that. A is for acknowledgement. Nobody gets sick of hearing, things that they're good at, and our partners love to hear it. And so, how can we give acknowledgement in some sense? S is for silly. So can we just like one day talk in a foreign accent and like throw our partners off? And, we can get so serious all the time. And so it's nice to just be fun and lighthearted. And then the E is erotic, right? So, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with sex, but can you just send your partner like a steamy text and get them excited? So to me, it's like, it's just these little things that can make a big difference in a relationship.
Yeah, I started one sort of accidentally, but I get up earlier. And so I'm having my coffee and everything. And then I can hear when he's getting up, And so I
Uh-huh.
like brought him a coffee one morning, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. You know what I mean? Because it just happened to, sometimes I do wake up later,
Yeah.
and it's nice because we get there and then then I get up there and we get into bed and we hang out. And it's kind of like become a little bit of an accidental sort of ritual tradition. And it's
Yep.
so cute because he really like looks forward to it now, I'm sure. But that's just like a simple thing. I'm already down
Yes.
there. I'm having coffee. It's already brewed. I hear him bring it up there. And then it's like creates a moment, and it's really
Exactly.
lovely.
When I always say positive behavior begets positive behavior. So you're doing something nice and he feels good. And in return, he's probably going to do something nice for you. So it's like it creates this really beautiful cycle too.
So one of the things I want to, maybe one of the last conversations here before we get into some more stuff about your book is I was talking to Ariel about this, and I'm not sure in which way. Well, I'll just bring it up. So this idea that sometimes we get into a relationship and we feel like that person should be our best friend, and our best friends, right, who know everything about us, know everything, like every single
Mhm.
thing, right? And I can see, like, one example is I know someone who's been married for a very long time, and they were saying that they were like, look, my wife's not philosophical, and I can't have those types of discussions with her. But I also didn't marry her for that. like I
Mhm.
have those discussions with Jim, Bob, and you know what I mean? And those are the people. And so, or let's say politics, right? Like I'm into it, I follow it, but my partner is just not into it, not as educated. Like, you know what I mean? It would be like someone who was a football fan trying to discuss it with me. It would be probably frustrating. And also I'm bored, I'm not interested in it.
Yes.
Sometimes I think we want these people to be on board with all of the things we're interested, right? Can we talk about how we have to compartmentalize,
Yes.
because if I really am going to break it down, it is not a deal breaker that my guy doesn't know enough, whatever, about politics, civics, whatever,
Yeah.
right? And so I have that conversation with three friends, right? And we're into it. And I don't have that conversation with other friends either because they're not into it. And I don't break up with them,
Exactly.
right? So can you attack that topic? Give us
Yeah,
some
sure.
examples within it, because I think it's important for people, because I think you start to then put off the rose-colored glasses and start to look at all the things that maybe aren't, right?
Yes, yes. Well, I think it's the same with friendships, right? So if I think about my friends, I can think of one friend that's fantastic at going out, right? She's my person. Like if I want to go out and have a good time, I think of this friend. And if I'm like in a serious mood and need to have like a deep conversation, it's like, oh no, I'm going to go with this friend. And so I just think that we have people in our lives for different reasons, right? And my one friend can't be everything. So it's that exact same thing. And I think you're right. I think we put so much pressure on our partner to be our everything. So I think there needs to be this acceptance. My partner cannot, by definition, be everything to me. So what are my main things that I need that are the most important to me? And
Right.
if my partner meets that, fantastic. And if my needs aren't met in the other ways, exactly. I need to find people who can meet that and stop looking to my partner to meet that, because it's like going to the hardware store for milk, right? You're not going to be able to get it. So, okay, let's put our energy into somebody who will and utilize our partner for the things that do work.
And I would challenge anyone listening, and you'd probably agree, I think, which is, if there's something you're thinking like, oh, they don't get this, or whatever the thing is, politics, this, what could be
Yeah.
religion, I guess, any topic, I would like to ask yourself, are they really smart about something you're dumb in? Because the answer is probably yes.
Good point. Yes. Spot
Because
on.
no,
You're
I
right.
mean, really, because like there's some things that when I looked at the politics thing for a minute, and then I was like, actually, you know what? I'm kind of judging someone's level of knowledge here, but yet my guy is so bright in ways I'm so dumb in, don't want to be smart in, don't even want to, you know what I mean? And
Yes.
so I think
Yeah.
that's always a good question to ask oneself when you're frustrated or you're thinking someone may be like, oh, they don't like, are there things that they're good at and know and are smart about that you're dumb at and that you don't want to know about? Because the answer's probably right, and you're just being a little bit too one-sided.
You're spot on. I love that because you're right. It's like flip it, and then you have a different perspective. I really like that.
What are you've worked with so many people and couples over the years. What are a couple of, success stories that stand out with relationship trouble? Some of the tough ones, or the things where people were like, oh, we've tried therapy,
Mm,
we've done this, right?
yeah,
What are
sure.
some of your 180s that can make someone listening go, no, it's possible, because that sounds like worse than mine,
Yeah, exactly. So yes, I have this couple. They're lovely, but wow. I mean, the both of them were extremely passionate, very feisty. They went in the room. I mean, they were so loud. I was scared that the therapist next to me were going to like knock on my door and be like, "Shh, quiet." They were like screamers and they were very passionate. And I kind of uncovered, there was a lot of hurt. On the side of the woman. And so we really kind of got through that of like, with her, it's like, I was trying to say to her, sometimes it's easier to be angry than to kind of turn inward and say I'm hurt and be
Yeah.
vulnerable and go there and say, hey, I'm really sad. You really hurt me. It's easier to be powerful and angry and you feel like you're in control. So we really broke that down and by the end of the session, she was crying and they were hugging and they were connecting. And it was like, yeah, sometimes you just have to get vulnerable to connect. And I think too often we just have this pride and ego and our partners can feel that wall. So that's one thing we did. And then the other thing was, they were so passionate. I was like, let's translate that into the bedroom. Both of you are so emotional and fiery. And wow, that would be amazing. Instead of using it verbally, like, let's translate it to the bedroom. And so that worked out really well. So it's like, okay, let's channel that same energy, which you both have, but put it in places that are good rather than harmful.
You just touched on something. I want you to expand on the vulnerability. I know it's a catchphrase and it's cliche now. We all say vulnerability is the greatest strength. It is. It was my problem. It's almost every alpha female's problem until you coach yourself or get coached out of it at some point. It was such an issue holding me back from having a partner who was emotionally available because I was not emotionally available because I didn't want to be vulnerable, because I didn't want to get hurt. I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want you to see all the things. And I can just say at this point, and I'm 50 years old, I've been through a lot in life. It's one of the greatest gifts ever. It also is a true sign of inner confidence and self-esteem to take that risk and be vulnerable. It's the biggest change I had to make within myself in order to get what I have now. And so can you please just get into vulnerability more?
Yes. Oh, I love that you said that. And I love that you owned it too. Yes. I mean, I think there's this fear, which makes sense. If I disclose something personal, I'm going to get farther from people and I'll feel more isolated. And it is the exact opposite. People feel more connected to you. They see you as human. They relate. They understand. And I think that once we get vulnerable, our partners get vulnerable. So it's a really beautiful kind of chain reaction that happens. But I mean, I think that's the only way to have a real authentic relationship. If you're not vulnerable, you're just kind of having like just like a one-dimensional relationship. So, if you can look at it through the lens of growth and opportunity, and yes, it's scary, but God, what's on the other side is so much deeper and richer. And I think, or you can stay comfortable and sheltered, but not grow together, right? And we want that growth. We want that togetherness. So I love that you said that.
I think, and I don't know what you'd have to add here, but it's so interesting. My guy is like bluntly vulnerable, like accidentally vulnerable. You know what I mean? He just says things that most people would be like, "Ooh, but he just says it." You know what I mean? And it's really a mind blower for someone like me who had to overcome that and still. But one of the tip offs for me, and I don't know if you can add to this, but if I look in hindsight, when I wasn't vulnerable and I was in relationships and I wasn't available, I can see now that when something negative would happen in my life of any kind, but something sad, someone's dog died, whatever, I would not want to tell my boyfriend because it's like, I don't want to bother them with this negative, right? Kind of like I would go talk to the friend about it, which then just kept me farther away from the person. They don't really know what's going on in my emotional world and my daily life. I just kept shoving it to the friends. Do you know what I mean? And that was sort of, that's probably a tip off for you out there if that's what you're doing. Are there any other kind of tip offs for people out there, to play on what I just said?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think you're right. I think it's like kind of recognizing like, okay, do I feel like I'm sort of putting up a little bit of like a wall, or what am I scared of? Like if there's that question, then yeah, like if you feel yourself holding back, then kind of push yourself to disclose and be vulnerable and kind of go there. Because yeah, I mean, I think again, you just can't get closer to somebody if you're not opening up. That is part of a healthy, successful relationship is, unloading the hard stuff, talking about what's painful and what you've been through or what's uncomfortable. But yeah, I think you're right in that, right. If you notice that you are kind of telling your friends other things, but kind of saving only the good stuff for your partner, then yeah, I mean, that's not the type of relationship that is going to serve you best, right? You want somebody who is going to be there for you through it all. Plus, they might give you a different perspective, right? That we all could use too. So if we can look at it that way, that might be helpful too. But
once you are vulnerable and you just do it, and then it's accepted and you're comforted or whatever the scenario is, it's almost like how, I talk about confidence. It's like compounded interest. It keeps growing, gets easier. And it's just, I don't know. I feel like it unfolds in a way. But you got to do it. And it's so gross at first. Oh, gross. Oh,
yep.
Ew. Yes. I think I just snotted, choked up, could barely get words out. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's just awful, but worth it. Really, really worth it, because the work that I did on that is just, the rewards are so worth it. Everybody get into it. All right. So everybody can get a copy of Love Hacks on Amazon and everywhere books are sold.
Yes. Fantastic. That's exactly
great. And then also, and we'll put, of course, everything to connect with you in the show notes, but it's KelliMillerTherapy.com, and that's KELLI MillerTherapy.com. And her Instagram is at Kelli Miller Therapy. Is there anything you'd like to leave with our audience before we wrap it up?
I loved all the questions you asked me. It was such a thoughtful, insightful interview. So I just want to say that. No, I think, the only thing I'll leave with is that, to me, relationships are hard, right? They do take effort, they take work. But I think what I want to leave with is that you can work through them, right? So I think there's this idea is especially now in our instant society where we get everything quickly and, it's like, okay, but if something's not working, then I'm just going to end it. It's done. I can't take it. And I want people to sit with some of that discomfort and say, okay, we might be going through a hard time, but I'm going to see this through, right? I'm going to give this kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation. Like, I really want to try to work through this. I think sometimes people give up too easily. And
Kelli, I was at Chuckers. That's what we call it, Chuckers. Like immediate, just
exactly.
And I talked with this about my friends sometimes because they were getting into a relationship recently, and then something came up, and I go, no. He goes, I know. I go, don't do the Chuckers. Don't do Chuckers. And he's like, I know, right. Because sometimes you can become that, but then you don't solve the problem. You run into it again.
Exactly. You're bringing it
any mindset shit.
Yes. 100%. So yeah. So, stay strong and work through it, and know there is light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to get through it. I mean, obviously if the relationship isn't right, for whatever reason, but on the other hand, if it's just hard and it's uncomfortable, just stick it through and don't stick through physical abuse, people. We are not saying that, obviously. Go immediately run, if there's that, but thank you so much, Kelli, and everybody get a copy of Love Hacks and start hacking your own relationship, or just get prepared for the one you want to be in if you're out there online dating and stuff, so that you can have these proactive, preemptive conversations when the time comes and you meet someone special. Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Everyone else, we'll see you next week.
Hey listeners, over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products. And I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.